you ultimately left Congress, as I understand it, was not acrimonious between you and AOC. In fact, my understanding is you hired your ultimate replacement, if memory serves, but you did leave. Why?
For a couple reasons. I'd say my skill was really in organizing and on the ideas front, and also I had a kid on the way at the time, so I had a kid come in, sometime in July, and my goal was to go in with her in her office, hire up her office, get her settled in, do the Green New Deal stuff, get that splash going. But then I really thought we just don't have enough progressive power within Congress to do much more. Like as a single member of Congress, she's not going to be able to, do everything we need. So I really felt like my role was going back on the outside, developing the ideas in the Green New Deal, turn it into real serious legislation for what we actually do want to do, which is what I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. But also trying to build the movement that can come into power, come into Congress, and make some of this big stuff happen. So the person I hired to replace me was someone who had a lot more connections in DC, could help, on the nitty gritty day-to-day legislation stuff in a way that wasn't my experience, right? That wasn't what I had experience doing.
All right. So this is, once it's an obvious question and once it is not, which is, why are you running against Nancy Pelosi? And the reason why I ask that is because obviously there is extraordinary discontent, even among the left, for the current state of the Democratic Party. If I may, I'll give you an admission here. I've never said this, it's only just recently happened. I switched my party affiliation here locally in DC to the statehood Green Party because I became frustrated would not be the word. I think anger would be a much more sufficient descriptor. But I get that Pelosi is sort of seen as like the swamp creature, 86 years old. We'll talk about the insider trading in just a moment. But I don't know that she's unpopular in the 11th District of California. So give me a sense of the purpose in which you are running.
I think Nancy Pelosi really is this keeper of the old guard. I actually have some respect for her too. I don't think she's all bad, but her skills are from this totally different era of politics. And I saw this in person when I was in DC as AOC's chief of staff in 2018. Her instincts are around how do we keep what we have right now from changing, right? How do we make sure anybody who's got any big ideas, they don't get too far ahead? She really attacked the Green New Deal and tried to get that stuff stopped in its tracks. And because she still remembers, I think, she still remembers the Republican Party from when she first got elected in 1987, which was this party that believed in democracy, believed in climate change, right? And I think she still believes that party's there somewhere, deep down inside. Any moment now, they're going to come around and become a sane, non-fascist party. And I think right now, to back up a bit, after Trump won and Trump really took a big part of this working class base that the Democrats had, I thought there'd be some sort of recognition from the Democrats. After everything, I shouldn't have thought this, but I thought, there'd be some recognition of like, okay, this is serious. We've got to change what we're about, change who we're standing for. And we've got to take this threat seriously. I mean, they campaign saying that if Trump wins, we're going to lose our democracy, but then they're not taking it seriously. And so then I just kind of saw what Pelosi and the Democratic Party leaders, how they actually responded to Trump winning. And it was a combination of treating this as politics as usual. Think of this as the usual thing of the pendulum swinging back and forth, right? Not taking the threat of fascism seriously. But also, Pelosi was actually on this interview where she got asked straight up, what did the Democrats do wrong? What do the Democrats need to do differently? And her answer was like, Democrats don't need to change. And I was like, come on, after all this, that's your view. And I think it's everything, in the Democratic Party. It's like Democratic Party ultimately needs a real plan and a vision to make people's lives better, or the authoritarians are going to win, right? And that's something they don't believe. That's something they don't think they got to do. And I think they have to do that. Doing a plan like that requires new ideas and new people, and that's not going to come from Nancy Pelosi. I think we need a whole new generation of Democrats that are going to get in there and change the system. I think people believe it's a rigged political and economic system, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to change it dramatically. But downstream from that, the culture of the whole Democratic Party is so just archaic. It's like the seniority-based big company culture. When I was in there in 2018, Trump would say something crazy And the Democratic Party response is like, let's schedule a press conference for next week to address this important issue, or write a strongly worded letter, as Chuck Schumer says. And they both don't have the vision or the strategy to fight what's going on right now. And they also don't have the tactics, So I think the whole thing's got to change. And my point, the reason I'm running against Nancy Pelosi, I mean, A, I live in San Francisco, so that's the representative I've got challenge. B, people in San Francisco, you're right. They do have respect for her. They like her, but they don't see her fighting this time. She hasn't done a town hall here in, I think, since 2019. She's actually doesn't work anymore. She's the only member of Congress not on a committee, right? So she doesn't actually have to do anything. And she's not vocally out there fighting against Trump. So people here have a lot of respect, but they're kind of ready for change, for what comes next. And I get a lot of voters on these Zoom calls that I do every day with voters who are lifelong Pelosi voters, who are really thirsty for something else, right? But I think the larger point I have is I do think we need, dozens and not hundreds of new people to go in and completely take over the party. And that's something I'm trying to do with the campaign, because if I'm able to defeat Nancy Pelosi and through this campaign, I will be able to recruit, and try to call on people to run all over the country and do the thing that I think just has to happen. I think the party's got to change, and we've got this old guard in there that's just like trying to stop it. They're using it with their last breath to like stop change in the party, and they have to be pushed out. Unfortunately, they're never going to let go of it on their own.
I spoke to Kyle Kulinski, who I'm sure you obviously know from Justice Democrats, and I was asking him because the question was essentially, what is the right path forward at this point, at this juncture in American history? Is it to keep in place the Democratic Party even through change in some kind of way, or is it to go third party? And he was adamant that third party is simply not a viable solution. Now, my particular situation in DC is obviously very different. It's a very, very, very different political environment on a local level, and then obviously in the national one, I mean, we don't even have a congressman who can vote beyond committee here, right? So it's a totally different ballgame. But the point he tried to make was it has to be reformation of the Democratic Party. But to the point that you raised, what you're talking about is wholesale internal borderline revolution, and obviously you have to run it state by state. But I would like to hear you give me the case, like, why can't a third party thing be viable? Now we'll talk about Zohran Mamdani in a little bit. Democratic Socialist is sort of this like tangentially aligned thing that is reasonably similar enough. I don't think that it requires a similar kind of lift. But give me your theory of why this internal push out is a better idea than trying to third party your way in.
Honestly, the main thing is because when we did Brand New Congress, we explored the option of potentially doing it as a third party. And the structural barriers are just really high. It's very expensive. It takes years in some states to get on the ballot. You have to, file all these petitions, and you have to win elections to permanently become a third party. Being a national third party in America is just legally and structurally very difficult compared to many other countries. And the other part of that, is there is, despite historic lows for both parties, there's still some loyalty there, right? And I do think it's easier than we think to change what a party stands for in people's minds. And I think we just saw Trump do this with the Republican Party, to be honest, right? Like Trump by himself basically changed what the entire Republican Party stands for, who they stand for, and the policies they fight for. And I don't think we should do it with, one individual with a cult of personality on the Democratic side. But what I think that tells me is if the people that are in the party completely change, if the brand of the people changes, then that changes what the party stands for. That's changed what people think the party is, right? I don't think the party itself, there's no larger machinery that keeps the party in line. At the end of the day, it's these party leaders and party elites who are trying to keep things as they are. So if they're gone, then it's the people that define what the party are. And I think that's just an easier way to get what we want to get across.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Please consider giving us a thumbs up as well as liking it. And if you want more of my politics coverage, go to the link in the description box for my Substack. Yes, go to my Substack. We might put a QR code on the screen here as well. Tons of exclusives, interviews, chat functionality with a whole different community over there. Tons of fun stuff. Give it a look.